the Abraham story. Obviously, you can spend a lot of time talking about Abraham, and so we're just trying to hit a few of the highlights. But the one thing I will say is, God comes along and says, listen, you're going to have a son. And give me a chair. You okay?
We're getting it.
Okay. Somebody start us out here.
Now the Lord was gracious to Sarah, as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at the very time God had promised him. Abraham gave the name Isaac to the son Sarah bore him. When his son Isaac was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him as God commanded him.
Okay, so God comes through on his promise. Now, I want to point out a few things. Interestingly, it says she became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age. He was old by this time. Y'all remember how old he was when he received the covenant, the promise? 75. And now he's 100. It's been 25 years. Dude is old, right? His wife is old. And she got pregnant, which was a miracle in and of itself. And now she has this, and then the line that kind of makes me laugh, probably Abraham, like, okay, God, says, at the very time God had promised him. This is not what he was thinking when God said, hey, I'm going to, bring forth a nation from you. He wasn't thinking, well, 25 years down the road it's going to happen, but this is what happens. Abraham, and if we have time at the end of this lesson, we may go back to the part I skipped and just hit on when Abram became Abraham and he had his name changed. But Abraham gave the name Isaac to the son. Sarah bore him. He was 8 days old. He circumcised him, which we may also hit on why that was such a big deal. This is a lot right here, but jump in and we're going to look at Isaac's kids now. So Isaac doesn't get a lot of Bible time, right? It's mostly Abraham, and then it kind of mentions Isaac, and then it talks a lot about Jacob and Esau. Somebody help me read some of this.
This is the account of the family line of Abraham's son, Isaac. Abraham became the father of Isaac. And Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel,
Just make it up, sure.
the Aramean
Sure.
from Padan Aram, and
Sounds like a Star Wars character.
I know,
Go
and
ahead.
sister of Laban, the Aramean.
Okay.
Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was childless.
She was what?
Childless.
Is that interesting?
Yes.
Why is that interesting? Because we know Abram's story, and later he becomes Abraham. Abram married Sarai, who became Sarah, and what was her thing? She couldn't have kids either. But the thing that God had promised them was, you're going to have a nation come from you. You're going to have a people. It's going to be like stars in the sky. You're going to have these offspring. And so in the very place that God has called him to be, interestingly enough, Abram means exalted father. And he couldn't have kids. And so in the very place that he was called to be, that's the very place he was attacked. And they couldn't have kids. And of course, God came through and we see Isaac. Now Isaac, the same thing is happening in his family. Isn't that interesting? And he's supposed to carry on this blessing, this promise that's been passed to him. But now his wife is in that same area struggling because she was childless. But watch what he did. The Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant. And that's going to tell us how old he was. It took him 20 years. So when God said, okay, I heard your prayer, I'm going to take care of it, it took 20 years. Isaac took it straight to God. We didn't go into it, but Abram, back in the day when they weren't having kids, and they're like, okay, we're getting older and older, and we're like, we just hit 90, like, what? Maybe we need to help this thing. Him and Sarah cooked up this scheme that maybe he should marry and have a baby with one of her servants. Right? Maybe that's how God's going to get the promise fulfilled. Maybe we need to help God out because God's moving really slow. And sometimes it feels like God is moving really slow. And so they were going to help God, which is always a bad idea. And that turned into a big thing. Isaac learned from Dad, and he didn't make the same mistake. He just took it straight to God. And he said, God, listen, this is what it is. And he prayed, and eventually Rebecca became pregnant. All right, keep reading in 22 here.
The babies jostled each other
Did you catch it? The babies? Two? Multiple? Go
within
ahead.
her. And she said, "Why is this happening to me?"
I'm sure many pregnant women have said that same line right there before. Why is this happening to me? Okay, keep going.
So she went to inquire the Lord.
All right.
The Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the other will be serve the younger.
The older will serve the younger. Is that usual? Is that normal for this day? No. Who normally served who?
The younger.
The young ones would have to serve the
The oldest.
eldest, right? And in fact, if you were the firstborn son, you had it made because you got this thing called the birthright, which is what? Is basically being one of the only heirs to the fortune or the family business or the money or anything like that. If you were the firstborn male, you inherited like 98% of everything, and then the other 1 or 2 or 3% would be separated between the other brothers and sisters. So it was like a big deal. The birthright was a big deal. But here God flips it and said, there's 2 very different people coming from you. And they're going to represent 2 different nations. And the older is actually going to wind up serving the younger, because God takes man's idea. The youngest one's all serving the older, this birthright idea, that's man's idea. That's not God's idea, that was man's. And God says, I can do what I want, right? You have your traditions, that's great, but I can do what I want. So finish this out here.
When the time came for her to give birth, there were twins, boys, in her womb.
Okay, now this is like one of the creepiest, most hilarious verses ever. Keep going.
The first to come out was red, and his whole body was like a, can you see that? Hairy garment.
Uh-huh.
So they named him Esau.
Okay,
Esau?
so yeah, Esau's born. Because when they saw him, they went, eee, because he was like red. That's not why. But he was red and hairy. He looked like a little baby Chewbacca. Like he came out, he's like, right? He's got this red, crazy hair on his arms, on his head. I mean, you know, the babies are born with like a little hair. Like, oh, that's so cute. No, he's like hairy and red, like a little Bigfoot. And so they're like, whoa, what is this kid? And this is Esau. And then right after that, of course, because there's twins, his brother is being born, kind of almost at the same time. Read that last verse for us.
After this, his brother came out with his hand grabbing
Esau's heel. So he was named
Jacob.
Which means heel grabber, right? It means heel grabber. And it's also a play on a word. It means supplanter. It means trickster. It means con man or scam artist. Would you like to be named that? Deceiver, liar, right? Wow, thank you, Mom and Dad. But it was heel grabber. Why? Because this is crazy. This little furry Chewbacca's born, right? Comes out and like, Esau. And they see him. And this other little creepy alien hand's coming out, and it grabs hold of his brother's heel, like as if to say, no, I want to be born first. And he's grabbing his heel, and he came out born that way. So they're like, let's name him heel grabber, which is Jacob, and it means these other things. And so Isaac was 60 years old. Right? So it took 20 years for his promise. It took 25 for Abraham's promise. It took 20 for him. And so these 2 very, very different boys are born. Now we're going to start focusing in on the boys, and specifically Jacob, this heel grabber, and what his whole story is. Watch this. Again, the more we get into this, the bigger the stories get. So you see there's a lot of verses, so don't get overwhelmed. We'll just break it down as we go. Somebody help me here.
The boys grew up, and Esau became a skillful hunter,
Okay.
a man of the open country, while Jacob was content to stay at home among the tents. Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob.
Okay, so this is a very healthy family dynamic. You can see, right? This is not going to lead to any conflict. Esau is whose favorite? Dad, right? It's Dad's favorite. That's Dad's boy. Esau is Dad's boy. It says Isaac, the dad, loved Esau. That's my boy. We go hunting together. We go fishing together. We're rednecks together, right? We're setting up tents. We're having the whole thing. We're eating s'mores. We're living off the land. That's my boy. He's a man, right? But it said Jacob was content to stay at home among the tents. Which gender is normally hanging out among the tents in this day? Girls, women, females, right? right? The women. And so he wasn't an outdoorsy guy. He wasn't a big fishing, hunting kind of guy. He was hanging out with mom. He was a mama's boy. It says that Rebecca, mom Rebecca, loved Jacob. That was her favorite. That little baby, I love it. Like, that was her little man, right? You're my little man. Taught him how to cook, taught him all these good recipes and how to do things at home and do all this kind of stuff. So you see these very two different characters come out here. All right, we're going to read this little story and then we'll come back to that idea. Help me out here.
Once when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau came in from the open country famished. He said to Jacob, "Quick, let me have some of that red stew. I'm famished." That is why he was also called Edom.
Edom was his nickname because Edom means red. So surprisingly, Esau's nickname was red because he was completely hairy and red all over his body. So they called him Edom, which is red. Go ahead.
Jacob replied, "First sell me your birthright."
Uh-huh.
"Look, I am about to die," Esau said. "What good is the birthright to me?"
What's the birthright? We said it earlier. What's the birthright?
Sons.
Like the will, like the firstborn gets everything almost when dad dies, right? When dad dies, the firstborn gets the family business, they get the possessions. Some, a little bit goes to the other ones, but you get most of that. And so Jacob says, "Sell me your birthright." Interesting. And Esau's like, "Look, dude, I'm about to die. You ever feel that way when you're hungry? You just need a taco and you're like, I will die, or I'll make somebody else die, but I need some food right now. What good is the birthright to me?" Keep reading.
But Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So he swore an oath to him, selling his birthright to Jacob.
Mhm.
Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and some lentil
Stew.
stew.
He ate and drank.
And then got up and left. So Esau despised his birthright.
Esau despised his birthright. That's interesting. But let's go back to these two characters. When I read a story, sometimes I like to think of a character. I think of like a Hollywood actor or something. If you ever do that, like you're reading a book, I gotta picture somebody, right? Like, who does this look like? So sometimes my mind works in like Disney, right? Like I think of Disney characters. So when I'm thinking Esau, I'm thinking like Gaston from Beauty and the Beast. No one fights like that, right? Right. Super manly, hairy chest. He's got the whole thing going on. And then when I think of Jacob, I'm thinking of Wart from Sword in the Stone. I don't know if you ever saw that, but he likes his tea and like all this, right? And this is Wart. And this is Jacob here. And then we get to this really good looking bowl of bean stew, right? And here it is. I got the cilantro. We're good. It's all good. I'm hungry right now. So let's talk about this stew because this is a big deal. One day, Esau's out hunting in his usual spot, right? He's got his little hunting grounds that he likes and he normally goes to. Well, it just so happens, do we think this just so happens? No. But it just so happens that Jacob decides to go cook. Hey, you know what? I just want to cook outside today. And he goes and sets up his little kitchen area by the field that his brother always hunts in. Is anybody smelling a setup, right? What does Jacob's name mean?
Sons.
Heel grabber, but it also means what?
Sneaky.
Sneaky, deceiver, con man, right? So he goes out there and he begins cooking. And those smells are going through the air, and Esau comes up and he's like, "Oh man, I didn't catch anything, but I've been hunting all day. I'm super hungry, man. Give me a bowl of soup." And he's like, wait, is that my favorite soup? "Oh yeah, this happens to be your favorite soup. I had no idea you were going to be out here, Esau. It's just crazy. I was out here cooking by myself, and you came along. And I happened to cook your favorite bowl of soup, and I got it all spicy, put those chipotles in it, just like you like it. It's great. Oh, did you want some? Yeah, give me some. I'm super hungry." And he goes, "Okay, you have to pay me for it." "Let me pay you, dude. I'm not paying. Give me a bowl of soup." "No, I'm not. No, you have to pay me for it." "I don't have a wallet. I'm out here killing deer. Like, what do you want from me, man?" Like, and he goes, "Okay, no big deal. I'll take credit here. Just give me your birthright. Swear to me. Swear to me. I'll have your birthright." And he's like, "Dude, I'm gonna die, right?" I don't know how hungry this guy was, but he felt like he was gonna die, or maybe he was just like saying that. But he said, "I'm gonna die. So I swear to you right now, when Dad dies, I give you all my rights as the firstborn. I give them to you." And Jacob goes, right? Like his evil, like little laugh, and rubs his hands together. And it says an interesting thing that Esau despised his birthright. Isn't that interesting? He looked down on it. He kind of spit on it. He didn't think it was that important.